Elon's not going to be like, oh my gosh, WestJet canceled their contract. What am I going to do? I can't pay the bills this month. So welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. This is episode 54. And yeah, we have another kind of packed day full of news for you guys. So hopefully this is entertaining. So why don't we not waste any more time and jump right into it? So the first story I have for you all tonight is around Bitcoin. Now, I know people are kind of avoiding looking at the market right now because, the market's been trashed. Bitcoin's actually held up relatively well, but, anything that's kind of even related to risk assets, if you're in, Bitcoin miners, if you're in MicroStrategy, if you're in Ethereum or anything like that, those have done kind of worse than Bitcoin for a long time now. But despite how the price action is, there are a lot of good news that I'm hearing that's coming out surrounding Bitcoin. And it doesn't move the market for whatever reason. But I keep saying this week after week. If you just ignore the price, I know the price is important to people, but if you could just set that aside for a second, if you just look at the news surrounding Bitcoin, if you just take it at face value, all of it's been good, right? I can't even think of one bad thing besides the price that's happened to Bitcoin in the past few months. So let me name another example of something good that just happened, right? So the first story we have tonight is GameStop has now officially filed to add Bitcoin as a Treasury reserve. So this comes after Michael Saylor had a meeting with the CEO of GameStop, Ryan Cohen. And yeah, I'm assuming that Saylor just totally orange pilled him. And after this, I don't know where this photo is from, but it's from like a few months ago, if I remember correctly. And yeah, he's finally gone out and done it. And this is something that's been rumored for a long time, but this is finally the day that it happened. And GameStop stock, it went up like, I don't know, it was like 10% or something the day of, and then it immediately crashed back down. And now it's actually trading for lower than before they announced this Bitcoin strategy, which is really weird, but that's how the market kind of reacts to news these days. And maybe it's also got to do with the fact that GameStop is going, kind of all out. They already have, I think, like $4 billion of cash or something on hand, almost $5 billion. And then they're raising another $1.3 billion in convertible senior notes. So maybe this is what's kind of freaking out people a little, because maybe the people who are big shareholders of GameStop, I know the shareholders kind of rotated, and it was at one point overwhelmingly retail, and I assume a lot of retail investors still have this stock, but maybe now there's like a little bit more institutional holders of GameStop compared to that like big bull run of GameStop back in 2021. But regardless, maybe this freaked out some of the institutional investors who didn't see this Bitcoin strategy thing coming. And whatever the case is, the stock dumped after this announcement. But this is objectively good news for Bitcoin, right? I'm not a GameStop shareholder, so I don't want to speak for GameStop shareholders. But as a Bitcoin holder, I see this as an absolute win because GameStop, they explicitly said that they're going to use this $1.3 billion that they just raised or is raising to buy Bitcoin. So that's kind of like a guaranteed inflow of capital. And then they still have like $4 or $5 billion of cash on hand that they could also potentially deploy into Bitcoin. Now, they haven't indicated exactly if they're going to use the cash on hand as well. But yeah, I mean, even if they use a little bit of the cash on hand combined with this offering of senior notes, I think it could be a big catalyst for more buying pressure to finally kind of reverse the downward sentiment that we're experiencing in Bitcoin. And more good news, there's both a Senate bill and a House bill in the United States Congress on the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So you know how Trump signed an executive order that establishes the Bitcoin reserve. Well, a lot of like the real action requires Congress, because like there's only so much you can do with an executive order, right? And with Congress, Congress moves at the speed of molasses. But what happens is that they're trying to push through two bills at the same time that's identical so that it can be done faster instead of having it being passed back and forth between the Senate and the House. There's a House bill and then there's a Senate bill, and they're, as far as I'm aware, pretty much identical. So you can kind of like do two things at the same time. So you don't have to wait for the Senate bill to finish and then get passed to the House and then do it all over again, right? But in the House, there's first of all, in the Senate, we have Senator Cynthia Lummis, who is a big Bitcoiner and supporter of the bill, and she sponsored the bill. But you're seeing a lot of kind of congressmen stepping forward and supporting the House version of the bill. So we just got another congressman that says that not only does he support the bill, he thinks that it will happen, and then he thinks that America will buy up to 1 million Bitcoin, which is 5% of the total supply. And I would argue it's probably more than 5% of the total supply if you factor in the 1 million Satoshi coins and then the 4 or 5 million that have been lost. So yeah, if the US already has 200,000, they might be buying 800,000 Bitcoin in the not too distant future if these bills, if the House or the Senate bill kind of make it through Congress eventually and passes and becomes law. So yeah, this is like a endorsement, although this is just one congressman, but I'm sure that there's also a lot of other Congress people that may not have publicly commented, but if it is put to a vote, there's the Republicans mostly support it, and then the Democrats are not all against it, right? So maybe if we have 90% of the Republicans support it and then 20% of Democrats support it, that's probably enough to actually pass the bill. So yeah, we just have to kind of wait till the bill makes it to that stage. We have a lot of other senior people. This is a comment from the Bitwise CIO, although he's probably kind of biased because he runs an ETF on Bitcoin, but the Bitwise CIO just said recently that now is the best time to purchase Bitcoin. So we've all seen the price kind of dip a lot, and then now it's consolidating. So maybe now it's like setting up for the big next bull run, right? And yeah, Russia, or Max Kaiser just said that he knows that Russia is quietly accumulating massive Bitcoin reserves. So I'm not sure, like Max Kaiser, he's kind of like an eccentric guy. He says a lot of things. So I don't know how much credence you want to put to what he's saying. But according to Kaiser, like he's pretty sure that he also said the same thing about China, by the way. So he also said China is accumulating Bitcoin. And he's recently just said that Russia is also accumulating Bitcoin. And yeah, to wrap this story up, I just want to share a couple of memes. So this is just us kind of waiting for the Bitcoin market to kind of take off. Where yeah, this is kind of like a thing that's living rent free on all of our minds, I'm sure. And then the second meme, I'm not sure if you guys have seen the trend on X to make everything Studio Ghibli style, but this is kind of the Studio Ghibli meme that somebody made about Bitcoin. It's like, why is Bitcoin going down? well, so it can go up again, and then everyone becomes laser eyes. So that's kind of all the stories that I've pieced together that indicate that the bottom might be near, or the bottom might already be in, and that we're ready for a Bitcoin bull run at any moment now. But it's just, we just have to maybe wait for a bit longer. So I won't ask you guys exactly when the Bitcoin bull market will start for reals, because I'm sure you guys also want to know the answer but don't know the answer. But I just wanted to ask you guys to kind of comment on any of the stories that we've mentioned. Is like, does any one story stick out to you? And what do you think the next catalyst would be to spark the bull run, if there is kind of a catalyst, right? If it's something that's I didn't mention on the list as well, that would appreciate your insights as well. So maybe it's none of the things that I mentioned. Maybe none of the things that I mentioned on the list has anything to do with when the next big bull run will start. Maybe it's something else completely. But I just kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on how this the remainder of this year will kind of play out for Bitcoin or for the market in general, or any ideas that you guys have.
I think that we're basically seeing, like, as many Bitcoiners have prophesized, that Bitcoin game theory is starting to play out. We're seeing clear signs of it. Like you said, Max Kaiser's a little bit eccentric and everything. So I mean, if he's got some information on Russia accumulating Bitcoin, I mean, he's not the first person to say that Russia's been doing this. So Russia has already indicated that they're looking into crypto to bypass certain types of U.S. like sanctions. So I just see that as Bitcoin game theory playing out. I also know that David Bailey has been commenting on China stacking Bitcoin, and he's the guy that basically convinced Trump to do it. I mean, he was very much like a force towards that. So on the nation state adoption, I seeing China and Russia get into it is just telling me it's exactly as we expected. Once America starts stacking, everybody kind of starts stacking. I am a little disappointed being a Canadian, because I just think that, like, historically we were kind of ahead of the curve on Bitcoin, having so many Bitcoin companies set up in Canada, and also having like Pierre Poilievre be the first like G7 politician to say anything positive about Bitcoin. But we're still kind of waiting for our moment. So I'll just say that from like the nation state adoption standpoint. I mean, considering we're one of the richest nations in the world in terms of energy resources, it's a huge opportunity for us. It would probably help us in the tariff talk situation, give us a little bit of stability away from the US dollar issues. But on the GameStop thing, I would say that I was looking at GameStop's like financial statements, and I'm seeing a lot of improvement in the last few quarters. And GameStop is certainly a company that can produce several $100 million in free cash flow to continually pump into Bitcoin, on top of the fact that they can leverage their balance sheet in the same way that MicroStrategy has. So I think it's generally very interesting to see a big company, a big high-profile company like GameStop, being a meme stock play out the way it is. It kind of makes sense too, considering the struggles of the company. And I think that, I mean, for me personally, I'm still going to just keep holding MicroStrategy. That's going to be the leverage play I want to do. But this is interesting because there's so many people in MicroStrategy, which means that it might actually create new Bitcoiners if it starts to perform well. And beyond that, like I haven't been following Congressman Bell Gitch, but I have been following Cynthia Lemis's bill, and I've always kind of been worried about getting the Democrats on side. But ever since Chuck Schumer kind of broke with the Democrats, especially the House Democrats, and was willing to like kind of let like the debt ceiling pass and all that stuff, the continuing resolution as they call it. I think I have a lot more hope that there's enough Democrats that will flip over to the pro Bitcoin side that we're probably going to get something going. I think that this could actually be Trump's first and maybe only bipartisan law that he passes in the next few months.
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned a lot of good stuff there. I think I'm going to talk more so about kind of what Andy was discussing earlier regarding what will be the catalyst. And I kind of feel like, from my perspective, it's really going to be hard to actually figure out what the catalyst is, because I feel like every time we think we figured out the catalyst, it's not the catalyst. So we're in a spot where all the news has been good for Bitcoin, I would say, or at least for the most part. So, GameStop buying some, additional purchases by the government would also be a massive thing. Just the government support from the US government in general, like that's absolutely massive. But and I mean, heck, even Russia buying Bitcoin, there's still a buyer, even if you aren't necessarily super keen on Russia owning some. But I think at this point we have I feel like we have all the stuff to have a run, and yet the run just isn't running, if that makes sense. Like, it's just I really feel like it should already be going, but it's just not. And I think part of that is the tariffs and some of those other overall market bringer downers, such as the tariffs and like those kind of things that are causing a lot of volatility in the market right now, and generally negative volatility, because there's just a lot of fear going around. Like, is this going to crash the world economy, cause a global recession? Who knows? But hopefully it's all just posturing for the most part from Trump, and we can get the tariff issues out of the way, and then the stock market will start running again, because that's really I think the stock market running would be a significant boost to Bitcoin itself running. I think just a more willingness from people to buy risk on assets will just lead to significantly more investment into Bitcoin. And a lot of these governments and such are adding to it while it's low, I think, and they may be hoping that it stays low for a while, but at some point there's an incentive for anyone holding it to have it go up. So at that point, it'll become harder to keep it low, as there's just more people buying it than they're selling at that point, right? So we're in a bit of a weird spot. We've been waiting for this Bitcoin run to run for months now, and I feel like all the stuff is there, but it hasn't actually done it yet.
Yeah, and on the tariffs thing, we'll have another story later on in the night for that specifically, but I just kind of want to quickly comment on that. So I know people are panicking over the tariffs, but often in life, especially in financial markets, the expectation is always way more exaggerated than what the actual thing is. So, for example, if there's some sort of like big news announcement that is coming, whether it's good or bad, if it's a good thing that people are expecting, then whatever whatever the stock or Bitcoin or whatever it is, it starts to run up closer to the event, and then when the event happens, it's always a disappointment because it's never as good as people think it is, and then it crashes, right? But I think that the reverse can actually play out with the terrorist thing, with Trump saying that, oh, April 2nd is Liberation Day, we're gonna like tariff the entire world, and people are freaking out about that because they're like, oh, this is going to launch a global trade war that'll last for years and send us into the next Great Depression. Well, Trump's already, I think I read the other day that he says that he's going to be lenient towards some countries, like he's making it as vague as possible, but in my opinion, he's giving himself plausible deniability, like plausible room to walk back on if the tariffs turn out to be sort of like a nothing burger, not a nothing burger, but like it's going to be something, but it's going to be maybe less than what people expect. And even if it is the same as people expect, I don't think the effect is going to be as big as people expect. So what I kind of envision happening, and I've been totally wrong about a lot of things for a long time now, so don't quote me on this, but I have a feeling that when April 2nd hits, some of like the market might actually be like a buy the news thing because it's not as bad as people expect, right? Sunil, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just forgot to mention what I thought the catalyst would be, but um, I actually agree with what you said about like it's a buy the news event. So I think that April 2nd is kind of like a date where like everybody's like set their hedges, expecting bad news, and I think that the news is going to be bad, but not as bad as everybody anticipates. So I kind of think that could be a turnaround date for the market, not necessarily on April 2nd, but that could be kind of like the milestone event where we end up getting a buy the news. But in the end, I think this ends up always being related to global macro and M2 money supply. I think that the actual setup for M2 money supply is actually really good, besides the fact that like we're still in a bad sentiment environment. So like we're still in a fear environment. We're still seeing a lot of selling here and there. We're still seeing bad days. When M2 money supply, M2 money supply has already started to go up. I expect that to have a lagged effect, and I expect that when things start to run, especially in risk assets, Bitcoin is going to probably run first or really early in that process.
I guess now we're just in kind of like a holding pattern. We're gonna have to wait and see, but it's definitely pretty stressful, I would say, and there's a lot of other things that are stressful. So if you guys are ready, let's move on to the second story of the night, where we'll talk about even more stressful stuff than the markets probably, because this is something that is going to affect us right here at home in Canada, where all of us live. And yeah, this is going to shape the next 4 years. I am, of course, talking about the upcoming election on April 28th. And yeah, this election is again, I don't want to like fear monger or like hype it up or anything like that, but I do think that this is one of the most important elections we've had in a very long time, possibly in like decades. I don't know if it's like, the election of the century or anything, but it's getting up there in terms of importance, because we're at I hope you guys are not tired of living in unprecedented times, because we are living in unprecedented times. And whoever wins this election is going to have to, deal with Trump. That's obviously the main thing, but also manage the Canadian economy, which has not been doing well. I think we can all admit, regardless of what you think about any political party, it has not been doing well, just objectively, like the economy or the country as a whole, for the past decade or so, right? And yeah, it's going to take a lot to kind of fix a lot of the problems that we're experiencing. But let me just kind of, give you the backdrop of what we want to talk about tonight. So the backdrop is that the Liberals are continuing to surge in the polls, and 338 Canada, which is a poll aggregator site, is putting the Liberals in majority territory now. So the most likely outcome is a Liberal majority with Mark Carney as our next prime minister, if nothing else changes, and if the polls are accurate. Maybe the polls are not completely accurate, which we'll talk about later on, or actually right now. So what if the polls like are not accurate, and what if it is accurate, right? So I've seen two kind of stories, right? So the first story is that the Liberals continue to surge in the polls, as I've said. But the second story, and this is anecdotal, but I've seen a lot of indications where Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, he's been doing all these rallies, and sometimes they're in densely populated areas, but sometimes they're not in densely populated areas. And wherever he goes, he draws in big crowds, right? So this is a photo from one of his recent rallies, where Stephen Harper's biggest rally in 2011, which was a majority year for the Conservatives, that was 2,000 people. But reportedly, this Pierre Poilievre rally had 4,500 people on a random weeknight in the winter. So at least according to the pleb reporter, who's granted he's a very pro-conservative channel on X, but according to the pleb reporter, he's saying that like it doesn't match up, right? Because Pierre's drawing these massive crowds, and it appears that Carney is having trouble drawing massive crowds. Granted, this was in I think St. John's, Newfoundland, which is not a very densely populated place. But Mark Carney was in Newfoundland, where he had a rally where only a 100 or so people showed up, apparently, or a couple hundred. But a large part of the people that showed up were actually not like cheering for Mark Carney. They were there to protest because the Liberal Party has had, apparently, again, I'm not a fisherman. This is hearsay from me, but I've heard that Mark Carney, or not Carney himself, but the Liberals have in the past put in a lot of anti fishermen kind of laws on limiting how much fish they could catch, and that's created some resentment among the fishermen in Newfoundland, because that's one of their main kind of sources of income, because again, it's not a very developed place, and a lot of people rely on fishing for a living over in Newfoundland. So a bunch of fishermen showed up to protest, and then Carney had to call the police on them, and then basically eventually they like locked out a bunch of the supporters or a bunch of the protesters outside of the building, and the police wouldn't let them in because they're afraid that they're gonna like cause too much trouble. So yeah, I've seen instances where there was also another story that I didn't include in the docket, but apparently there was like Mark Carney went to a factory, like some type of like mill or factory, to like do a rally, do a press conference in front of the press, and then the workers were standing behind him, and apparently the workers are very anti-liberal. So I don't know why he decided to like get a bunch of people that he didn't that doesn't support him to like kind of stand behind him. Maybe like the company that the workers worked for made them do it. But regardless, one of the guys apparently refused to shake Mark Carney's hand because he hated the Liberals so much. And I'm just seeing a lot of these types of stories happen with Mark Carney and the Liberals, where they're not getting a lot of support among like the working class, and then the crowd sizes for the rallies are noticeably smaller than Pierre Poilievre. So it's just a lot of, I know this is all anecdotal, but it just seems like it doesn't match up with what I'm seeing in the polls, right? Because every poll that I'm seeing, the Liberals have just been going up, like every single poll. And they go up more as time goes on. So the trend is not reversing in the polls. But what I'm seeing from anecdotal evidence is that support for the Conservatives still seem to be rather high. And maybe like if the polls are wrong, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, but if the polls are wrong, it might be due to kind of the way that Mark Carney himself has handled some of the questions from reporters and stuff. Now, I think it was Tristan, you last week, you brought up something about how, you had concerns about Pierre Poilievre because he's, sometimes he's rude to the press, or at least perceived to be rude to the press. But it seems to me that Mark Carney is also kind of rude to the press sometimes. So there was a French reporter who asked him a question in French, and then I think it was something that Mark Carney didn't want to answer, because I know there's some like controversy about him not disclosing his assets and stuff. And then he answered, "That's enough, okay," but in French, right? But it translates to "that's enough." Like, I don't want to talk about it, and it's just like a very stern response. And yeah, this is kind of a little bit concerning in my opinion, because this whole like controversy about him not disclosing his assets and stuff, I think that's like that is a bit of concern. Like, if you're running for prime minister, then you should probably disclose any potential conflicts of interest, right? And it's not like people are accusing him of conflicts of interest directly. It's just if you have no conflicts of interest, then you should be able to disclose your assets and stuff. That's not a very big ask, in my opinion. But maybe other people have different opinions. So yeah, it's just the way that he's responded to some questions has been questionable. And there was also another instance where his it's clear that Mark Carney's French is not very good. I mean, it's better than mine, which is like no French. I don't speak any French at all. So it's better than mine, but maybe that's not saying much. So there was a question that was asked in French, and he answered it halfway in French, and then I guess his brain just stopped working because he couldn't remember how to answer the rest of the question in French because it got too complicated, and he just switched to English. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe some Quebecers, I can't speak for Quebecers, but maybe some Quebecers would not look upon that so kindly because Quebecers really care about French. Although it does seem like the Liberals' support, especially in places like Montreal, is surging. So maybe Montrealers don't care, but other people in Quebec, I'm sure, will probably care. Anyways, all of this is kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And hopefully maybe we can badger Tristan again about a potential endorsement. But yeah, even if you don't want to give an endorsement, just at least maybe respond to some of the things that have come up either on Pierre Poilievre or on Mark Carney, and has your opinion of any of these candidates changed? And I'll throw in like Jagmeet Singh in there or Elizabeth May or whoever you want to talk about as well, if you want to talk about any of the other candidates. But has your opinion changed on any of the candidates? And what do you think of all the stories that I talked about now that we're in our first week of a federal election campaign?
This isn't necessarily explicitly what you were saying, but Carney's also just been stealing a lot of stuff from the conservative platform, and now he's throwing some sass at the press too. Kind of seems like the Liberals were like, "We're gonna lose to the cons, so we'll just become the cons." Like, honestly, like they're like, "Oh, we're gonna cut taxes. We're gonna, what was the other? We're gonna cut the carbon tax. We're gonna do all these things." Straight from Pierre's playbook. So it just feels like Carney is really just copying Pierre. And so on that front, it really comes to, do you trust the Liberals? I guess Sunil's saying Jagmeet promised tax cuts. Did he really? That's hilarious. I didn't hear about that. But yeah, I guess they're all promising.
I just saw it late in the day. It was late in the day. I just saw a headline that Jagmeet saying that said promised tax cuts, and I thought that was funny, just based on what you were saying yesterday on the group chat.
Yeah, everyone's just like, what's working in the polls? Let's just grab that from everyone else, Like, it's kind of crazy. I think it really comes down to who the heck do you think is actually legit on this front? Like, who's actually going to do what they say, and who's just talking out of both sides of their mouth? Because like I feel like a lot of this is they're saying stuff to get elected, and then when they're not, like when they're actually in power, there's so many reasons why I can't do that. Just like how the Liberals in back in like 2015 or 2019, I don't remember which election there was, or I don't even remember when the previous elections were, but I remember there was one of them where the NDP was like really pushing for proportional representation, and the Libs were like, "We'll do that," and then they were also like, "We're just not actually going to do that." Just kidding. Everyone forget about that one. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Just forget about that. No one heard of that. No one voted for us because of that, right? So at this point, I feel like the Liberals are really just grabbing for anything to get them support. desperately. And I mean, I guess Jack Beat's doing it too with his tax cuts. So it just, yeah, I feel like we're at the point where it's like, who do you believe is actually being truthful? Do you want Carney, who is clearly just grabbing stuff off of Pierre's notepad and planning to do things that way? Or you've got Pierre, who's, apparently providing everyone's notepad. Like, everyone was just like, that Pierre guy, he's doing pretty good in the polls. Let's just copy some of that over.
Bro, can I copy your homework? It's like, yeah, sure. But just change it up a little.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like at this point, because they're becoming so similar also, I feel like this helps Pierre more than it helps Carney, because Pierre, one, has been saying it this whole time. So you can't be like, or like saying this sorts of stuff. You can't really be like, Pierre's changing his perspective. He's changing what he's saying. And to be fair, Carney wasn't explicitly saying anything prior to now because he was non-existent prior to now. But I feel like the fact that Pierre's been saying it for so long, he's been, holding these rallies and stuff and getting lots of support. I think that it's probably, it definitely feels more likely that he'll actually do some of what he says, particularly since a lot more of it is aligned with his kind of, perspective, like their kind of the conservative kind of perspective of like tax cuts and stuff. So we're kind of gonna have to see how it plays out. I don't think I think Carney is setting himself up to be more not progressive, the other one, conservative than the previous leaders that have been, like Trudeau, that's been in power, because he's definitely supporting a lot more things that are towards the center. So he's trying to appeal to the majority of the population that exists somewhere between the conservatives, the extreme conservatives, and the extreme progressives. So I think in the long run, that's probably a good strat, but it makes him harder to differentiate from Pierre, since, most of Pierre's big items were on the front of, towards that middle of the group of people who were like, I don't really care. I just want to be able to buy my stuff, go to my job, get paid, go home. I want to be able to have a house. Like the people who are, the majority of the population, not the people who are like, but what about the rights all the time? It's like, the average person, not the more of the extremists on either side. So I think this is probably a good strat in the long run for the libs. And I think on the regards to the media stuff, it's just like the Carney does not seem nearly as camera ready as some of the others. He's definitely kind of, and honestly, I think his French is really harming him too, because him, like one of the examples here of him being like, that's enough kind of thing. Like, but the French person, are you even sure that he knew that was going to come off as rude in French? Because like, I'm not suitably convinced his French is good enough to actually know that he would be sounding rude,
I mean, even in English, it sounds kind of terse, right?
Well,
and actually, I was maybe like trying to give him credit the other way, where maybe it sounds bad in English, but maybe it doesn't sound as bad in French, because I'm speaking from a non-French speaker's perspective, so I don't know, right? But like, is it I don't know if there's any audience members that will be watching this show that speaks French, but like, if you do speak French, leave it down in the comments and be like, hey, is it is it really rude to just like cut somebody off and say that's enough, but in French? Like, I don't know. Is that like a normal thing to do, or is it the same between English and French? Like, because I don't know. Like, yeah, especially if it's something that's like a fair question, which I think, like, if I remember correct, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but I don't think it was a super unreasonable question. If it was a fair question, then like, and you just cut somebody off and be like, no, that's enough. I don't want to answer it anymore. It comes off as pretty rude to me from my elementary understanding of like French and just how, like, I don't know, culture works in general. I don't really know what to say here, but yeah. Anyone else has any thoughts?
I mean, I guess like the first observation is that the Liberals aren't running on their records. So that's like a weak way of campaigning. It's just not a good sign that they don't have anything that they want to be proud of. I mean, we talked about this last week. They're already running away from the carbon tax and everything. And then, as Tristan mentioned, like they're actually like copying some of Pierre's election promises. So sometimes this stuff works in elections. Like it worked when the Liberals copied the NDP, but for us, like it's very transparent that the Liberals are running away from their record. So it's not a good look. And with Jagmeet joining in on the tax cuts, like it's a pendulum shift. Like there's a lot of the talking points that you would hear from the left over the last 10 years just aren't being said right now. Like they're not talking about taxes for the rich, or the rich have to pay their fair share. They're saying a lot more like neoliberal talking points. So that's just a bad sign that both the Liberals and NDP are like kind of running away from their record and are not comfortable saying left-wing things, which they have been comfortable saying in the last like 15 years. So I think that's weird. But I mean, I'm sure they will still like try to get their base electrified during this campaign. I think this is just the early days of the campaign where they're kind of trying to set themselves and kind of set a positive narrative around the campaign. But I mean, I think it's like the previous comment. Like, I think it's definitely a circumstantial election. I think it's consequential. It's there's this young versus old element where a lot of the working class people are actually like very young, because like young people are working, and there seems to be a big divide between people who are established, have their houses paid for, have had like nice lives in Canada, and they feel fairly comfortable right now. And the Liberals have also like indicated they're very interested in making sure boomers like property values stay like afloat and stuff. So the Liberals have done a good job like signaling to like the senior citizens of this country that like they're behind them. So it's working. That aspect of the Liberal campaign is definitely working. I think that Pierre Poilievre certainly has a better grassroots advantage in his campaign. Like we're talking about crowd sizes. Like it just shows you that he's connecting with workers, he's connecting with people, and it's a good sign that he's connecting with the right type of voters. He's not just connecting with like rich bankers and stuff. He's in the types of voters that should be voting for NDP and Liberals historically. Are now very much on side of Poilievre, so that's interesting. But I mean, it's not. I don't think it's all good for for Poilievre. I think that there's something he's been making some mistakes. I'm actually very disappointed because he's the first conservative candidate I've ever like kind of gotten excited about, and I was excited about him because he was like very bold. He was quick on the mic. He was willing to fight the media. He was willing to push back against just like nonsense that was said about him, like them calling him alt-right or a Nazi or whatever that is. And now he seems to be very like going during the tariff debate. I think the conservatives took a much more like conservative consultant type approach, which is like stay quiet, don't say anything, don't ruffle any feathers. I thought it was a great opportunity for Poilievre to get out there and show how he's different than the Liberals, and even break some convention, go on podcasts in the US, fight for Canada's side. I mean, there was the thing in the news where the PBD podcast called out Poilievre because he denied their invitation. I think that was a great opportunity for him to go on a pro-Trump podcast. He didn't need to be nice to them. He could have gone on the podcast and fought them and argued with them and like differentiated himself as a fighter for Canada. And it was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. And I think there's been a lot of missed opportunities. I think that if Poilievre continues to rely on the media as his as his microphone, they're gonna keep covering him in a very negative way. The coverage is already very, very negative, trying to tie him to MAGA, trying to tie him to like alt-right or extreme right politics. And like it's not going to be a fair fight. The media clearly likes the liberals. I think that there's a financial element to it because they realize that if the conservatives win, all their funding that's keeping the Canadian media from collapsing is going to dry up. So I mean, the only way that Poilievre can change the script is if he gets off. He gets like in the word in like internet lingo. If he gets out of the matrix and kind of goes on like long form podcasts, and that's the only way he could break the script. That's the only way he can force the conversation to change. Because as long as the conversation is within traditional media, they're just going to serve the liberals. And that's why I think polls are moving in the liberals' directions. I've been watching even Google Trends. It's moving in the liberals' direction. Poilievre's losing this race. If he keeps doing what he's doing and relying on the traditional media to argue his points, he's going to lose. I think that Carney's going to win this campaign if that's the case. I do think the Poilievre needs to be a little bit more bold. He needs to be, when I started liking Poilievre was when he was putting out ideas about Bitcoin. He was putting out a lot of bold ideas, and he wasn't acting like a normal like neocon. But now he's kind of acting. I feel like he's acting a bit like a neocon. I feel like even his tax strategy on TFSA should have been bolder. I think that this is an opportunity to have like a libertarian type candidate that like proposes things like 0% taxes on Canadian business to try to like help Canadian business get through this moment. And I don't think that Poilievre's doing a great job. I think he's doing an adequate job. I think he could squeeze one through. He could potentially get a minority government, but I'm not seeing majority territory for the Conservatives. I'm seeing some things going in their favor, like the crowd sizes and stuff. But he has to break through further. He has to get some people on the in the senior citizens to vote for him. There's a lot of people on the fence in like our age group that he needs to get to vote for him. And I think the only way he can break through is to do something bold, like go on Joe Rogan. They're gonna call him a Nazi or they're gonna call him alt-right anyways. So like they might as well go on Joe Rogan, get called a Nazi, and then have 15 to 20 million Canadians watch him in long form or watch 25-minute clips of him talking to Rogan, and it's going to change their opinions. I've even seen conservatives come out and say like, I'm a moderate conservative, I'm going to vote for Carney because he's an economist. The media is supporting Carney, and he's going to win if this is the way Poilievre decides to approach the campaign. So I think that he needs to be bolder, and he needs to break through the media bubble. He needs to get out of the matrix. And I had one more point here. Yeah, I think Carney does come across as very wooden and boring, and he seems out of place, and it just doesn't seem to be his element. And he's not attracting working class voters, but he's still leading in the polls, so that scares me. And I think that what I said in the previous point is exactly why that's happening. I actually don't think Poilievre's running a great campaign yet.
You actually changed my mind around the Pierre Poilievre going on alternative media type of stuff, because at first I was kind of a little bit scared of the potential of Pierre going on American media because of the sentiment right now between pro-Trump, especially pro-Trump podcasters like Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet-David and all that stuff. But yeah, what you're saying is right. I actually agree with you now. I think you convinced me that just on the baseline, right? Whatever Pierre is doing, it's clearly not working. So if he continues down the same path, then he's going to lose. So I think at this point, he doesn't really have that much to lose more by going on American media. And by the way, Carney kind of soft launched his own campaign on the Jon Stewart Daily Show. I'm not sure if you guys remember that, but liberals are apparently they're okay with that, and nobody's calling, Carney the next MAGA pro-Trump candidate, right? Even though he worked a lot in America, and he's worked obviously as the Bank of England governor, so he lived in London for a long time, and not London, Ontario, but London, England. So yeah, I mean, it's I definitely think that there needs to be, just like the market. I feel like the conservatives and the stock market are kind of two things that are tied together somehow. I don't know how. Obviously, like I don't think the Canadian conservatives are big enough or famous enough to like move the S&P 500, but like yeah, it's just there needs to be a sentiment change. Right now, they're both going down. And if nothing changes, then it's just going to keep going down, and then we're going to be stuck in a rut forever. Yes, Sunil, you had something to add.
Yeah, I just had 2 points to add. One is that if this campaign continues to be about like the tariffs, and that's a central issue, I think Carney's going to win, because the media clearly is good, and the media is a part of that issue. Like if maybe Pierre can break through and get on Joe Rogan and fight for Canadian issues on that platform, but he's not going to be able to get a fair fight in the Canadian media. So I don't know. I forget what I was going to say. Forget this. It doesn't matter. But the other point I wanted to say is that considering the whole French situation, I think my boy Chandra Arya deserves an apology from the Liberal Party.
Yeah, no. So, in case you guys are not filled in about what happened with Chandra Arya, he was kicked out of the leadership race for the Liberals because apparently because of French or the lack thereof of French, and then he was also denied the opportunity to run in Nepean, however you say it. It's like a suburb of Ottawa, which is his former seat, and then now he's not allowed to run in that seat. And the Liberal Party gave a bunch of random reasons like, oh, like we're afraid that he's connected with India, right? Which we're not on the best terms with India right now, let's just say. So, I guess like if he was actually connected with India, I guess that would be a valid reason. But then also there's no like solid evidence, or at least I haven't seen any, of how Chandra Arya is influenced by India in any way. And besides, like they let him run last time, right? So it's like it's convenient that when there's an election finally, and they need to open up a seat for Mark Carney, which is the second part of this story, where they deny Chandra Arya the ability to run in Nepean. And then guess who announced that they're running in Nepean instead of Chandra Arya? It's Mark Carney himself. Right? So I don't know. It's just kind of like suspicious or convenient that a seat just so happened to open up in a district that is I wouldn't say overwhelmingly liberal, but it's like a pretty safe liberal seat, right? And like there's like a pretty much like a 95% likelihood that Carney will win his seat if he runs in Nepean. So yeah, I mean that's that. And I just want to also talk about your point earlier, Sunil, about the media being kind of pro-left or pro-liberals. I definitely see that as well. And it's funny how the media, and maybe some people would dispute me on this and say, oh, the mainstream media, they're objective, they're not pro-left. Like, come on. Right? Like if you were to be honest with yourself, I think that and you spend just a little bit of time watching like CBC or CTV or any of the mainstream platforms, they're very clearly, I would say, the progressive side, right? And even with a progressive media, there's still media gaffes that Mark Carney is making, right? Like all the stuff about being rude to reporters and stuff. Like Carney is doing a lot of that as well. Or I would say that Pierre is not even like rude to the media. That's just the way that they paint him, which is going to be the way that the media conducts itself. But even with like a media that's technically on Mark Carney's side, there's like instances where he has gaffes and stuff like that. So I just think that, yeah, like Pierre's definitely like there's something that he needs to do to change this, where I actually think that Mark Carney is probably a weak candidate, or at least he's not the best candidate that the Liberals could have run. But it's just he's still winning because because there's all these like narratives and stuff, like the reasons that Sunil you said earlier, right? But
And
yeah,
the media isn't reporting on any of the controversy around Mark Carney's candidacy. Like they're not reporting on anything, like his Brookfield deals, moving jobs to the U.S. and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, or they did report on it, but it was like very quickly in and out, right? Like there was maybe like one or two stories, and I've seen then some stories on the National Post, which is kind of the only maybe slightly right-leaning mainstream media source. A lot of the stories that are anti-Mark Carney I've seen from the National Post, but like I feel like nobody else is saying anything. Like if you're a CBC watcher or CTV News, which is owned by Bell, which is like, you know, granted they're probably deeply connected with both major parties, but CTV has been really pro left, I would say. So yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot of kind of these, uh, you know, progressive sentiment in the media, and then Mark Carney is still messing up sometimes, despite
there are also financial incentives for the media because the liberal government funds the Canadian media through because it was like a bailout that they put through. Like the Conservatives have made it very clear that if they win the election, they're going to cut the media off from public funding. There is a financial element. I'm not saying that that's the reason why, but like I don't know, when there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, there's a financial element here, and ever since the media, like Globe and Mail used to be like a newspaper that was like kind of conservative, but sometimes would go liberal, and like ever since they got public funding from the media, they're pretty much a liberal newspaper now.
I do have a second part to the story on the prime ministerial campaign, which is former NDP leader Tom Mulcair. He recently wrote something that I know, like this headline, when I first brought it to you guys, I know, Tristan, you disagreed on exactly what those words meant when Mulcair wrote them. But the interpretation from another Tristan, this is Tristan Hopper, from I think he's from the National Post. The headline to this story is former NDP leader Tom Mulcair tells Canadians not to vote NDP. So we'll discuss exactly whether that's the meaning or is there like some more nuance to it. But what Mulcair wrote was that if you can't say seriously that you're going to form a government that can take on Trump, then get out of the way. So this was taken as kind of a jab at his own party, his own party's leader, Jagmeet Singh, who's, you know, saying, I want to be prime minister. I'm going to take on Trump. I'm going to fight. It's funny how like that's a Trump slogan, but Jagmeet Singh is saying fight every time every chance he gets. But anyways, the NDP are polling at like single digits. If you trust any of the polls that are coming out of the NDP, they're polling at like 8 to 9% right now. High single digits, but still single digits. And they might lose more than half of their current seats, which is already not that many because they're the third biggest party in Canada. And then after this election, if nothing changes, if the polls are accurate, then they'll lose like most of their seats, like probably more than half. So this is kind of what I think Mulcair was getting at, where it's like you can't really, like, if you vote NDP, you're sort of splitting the vote, and then you're tossing your vote away on a party that can't really win. And even if they win this seat, then it's going to be one seat out of like a lot of other seats that won't go to the NDP. So it's kind of like what the interpretation that I got from this was that Mulcair is saying, hey, like, vote for one of the two parties this time, because the two major parties, i.e. the Liberals or the Conservatives, because they can actually, either of those parties would have a chance of forming a government that actually works, that can take on Trump. And if you don't, if you split the vote and then you get like a mess in Parliament where nobody has kind of a commanding majority, then you're going to get a messy response to Trump, and then that could be an existential crisis. And that's not me taking words out of his mouth. He literally said that what's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth is an existential crisis to Canada. And I think that you'll actually find a lot of people in Canada that would agree to that sentiment, where, you know, Trump is saying all this stuff about the 51st state over and over again. So Mulcair is saying that, hey, like, we need to unite under a government that actually works this time around, and maybe it would be beneficial to not split the vote this time, which, you know, it's kind of like saying don't vote for the NDP, vote for one of the two major parties. At least that's my interpretation. So why don't I pass it off to you, Tristan, first, where maybe you said that you disagreed with this headline, that he didn't actually say don't vote for the NDP. So what's your interpretation of this statement that if you can't seriously say that you're going to form a government to take on Trump, then get out of the way? What did Mulcair mean by this, in your opinion?
Well, I might be disproving what you were saying earlier, what I was suggesting, but I think that he is saying not to vote for the NDP in general. I think he's maybe not necessarily, okay, maybe he's not necessarily explicitly saying don't vote for the NDP, but I think he's saying that at this point, the Liberals and the Conservatives are the only viable options. It's not the time to mess around with the fringe parties. It's time to, you know, vote for one of the big guys, because at this point, you know, if you're more aligned with one of the parties than the other, it's probably better to put your vote in that bag rather than, you know, be supporting the NDP, who at this point have proven that they have basically no chance of getting into power. They're kind of, they don't really have much to offer right now. Whether they have good ideas, whether they have bad ideas, when it comes right down to it, everyone's kind of fearful. This is not the time to put in an unknown entity and you know, see if the NDP is going to do a good job. This is not your time for experiments. This is your time for, you know, one of the two big parties that have run the country for a bajillion years. Not actually, but you know, that's kind of what I think he's really saying. It's like, I think he's kind of alluding to that fact rather than you know, encouraging people to vote for the NDP and, you know, have something completely that they're not aligned with. I honestly don't think he's saying that people should vote Liberal necessarily. I think that's maybe where we kind of saw more of a disagreement, because I think you tend to go, if you're NDP, you should vote for Liberal. No, maybe not should, but you're probably more aligned with the Liberals. Whereas I feel like there's a core group of NDP folks who are socially pretty liberal, but fiscally relatively conservative, who are in a weird spot where they align better with the Conservatives on the fiscal side, but better with the Liberals on the social side. And I think at this point right now, I think most people, the fiscal side is much more front of mind than the social side. And so the NDP supporters who fall in that category may be going towards the Conservatives in this instance, rather than the Liberals that we would assume, just, you know, looking at the graph of like where things are left, right, you know, the Liberals might be closer to the NDP, but actually, if you're really looking at like the perspectives of the NDP on those fiscal policies, you know, back in Mulcair's day, the NDP was much more of a fiscally conservative entity rather than what it is today. So I suspect that there's a significant portion of NDP supporters who are from that time period, who don't align very well with the Liberals, who are just spend, and who may have been more aligned with Jagmeet when he was first brought into power, like the NDP group, but are now realizing that maybe this is not what they're really into. And I'd have to double check on the dates for, I guess Mulcair was leader till 2017. So we have had Jagmeet for a while then. So maybe some of those folks have been pushed out, or maybe they voted for Jagmeet in the previous election only to realize as time has gone on that they are not super into him. But we haven't had another election for them to really showcase that disagreement. Because I feel like the most recent election, I think it was 2021, he was still kind of a relatively fresh face. Compared to Trudeau and such, and I think on that front he seemed a lot more appealing, and I think he did some pretty good social media and stuff appearances that generally painted him in a relatively positive light, at least in my perspective. Like, I know you guys think that his Among Us stage was kind of cringe, but I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was moderately endearing. Like, I was like, oh, that's neat, you know. He plays games with the normal people, you know. That's cool. Most people I know haven't. I like, there's no chance that I've run into a politician in a video game and been aware of it. Whereas, like, you could watch people like play games with them. So I thought that personally was relatively good advertising for him, at least from my perspective. It kind of showcased that he was it leaned into the fact that he was a younger candidate than a lot of the other ones. So I think at this point the fiscally conservative NDP folks are potentially going to jump ship pretty hard to Pierre. I think that's kind of where I'm really leaning towards on this front.
Yeah, actually, on that note of like politicians acting like normal people, my dad told me the other day that back in the day, when he was on his way to work one day, he worked in downtown Toronto. He ran into Stephen Dion, who was the leader of the Liberals back then, and he just looked like a random guy. Like, there was no crowds of Secret Service bodyguards around him. Maybe there were, they were just disguised and hidden somewhere, but it didn't seem like he was surrounded by a bunch of tall guys in sunglasses. He was just walking apparently by himself, and then my dad went up and said hi to him and shook his hand and stuff like that. And I don't think he even realized exactly who he was. He definitely he knew that he was a politician or something, but it was during it was either during the election campaign or shortly before that, where this is a guy that he ended up losing the election, but at the time we didn't know that, and it's this guy could be the next prime minister of Canada, right? So yeah, I mean, there are politicians. It's kind of like a thing in Canada, I feel like, where we don't always treat our politicians like they're some super elevated, godlike person. And I think that that's actually a very healthy thing, because politicians are just random people at the end of the day, right? But back to Tom Mulcair. I totally get. It's just at first I had maybe kind of a hard time understanding the mindset of the NDP and conservative swing voter, because they're these two parties are so far apart, right? So I don't know, maybe if you're watching this from America, you don't know exactly what the difference is between the NDP and the conservatives, but it's kind of an AOC versus a Donald Trump. It's maybe it's not that far, but it's almost that far apart, and it's it seems like a big swing between the NDP and the conservatives. But I guess like you said, Tristan, maybe back in the day when Mulcair was leader of the NDP, the party was a lot more towards the center. I mean, obviously they're still left leaning, but they were closer towards the center compared to what it has been under Jagmeet Singh. And I don't know. I think I don't want to like, spread rumors or anything, but from my perspective, it does seem like maybe there is some animosity between Mulcair and Jagmeet Singh, where maybe Mulcair is not very happy about the way that Jagmeet has led the party, and especially in this election, if polls are to be believed, then the NDP will lose a lot of seats whenever the election happens. So. Uh, my question, I'm going to toss it to you, Tristan, first, and then we'll toss it to Sunil. But do you think that Mulcair will vote for Jagmeet Singh? Because it doesn't seem like it if he's saying stuff like this, where we need to vote in a government that actually works for the people. So if he's not voting for his own party, if he's not voting for Jagmeet Singh, there's only two, like, I mean, I guess he could vote Green Party, but that would fall under the not being able to form a government to take on Trump as well if you were to vote for the Green Party. So I would assume that like a lot of us here, the only two viable choices are liberals or conservatives. Do you think Mulcair, knowing what you know about him, do you think he's actually going to vote conservative, or if he's just going to vote for Carney, which is the more, I guess, politically aligned person?
So amusingly enough, I think he might vote for Carney, but not for the reason that we think. So I was looking at some of the posts that he's made in the past, and I get the vibe he does not like Pierre, like personally, not necessarily as like a like not like hate him, but I get the sense that like when because they were both in conflict when he was opposition leader, right? And he's said in the past that like he found Pierre like kind of schwarmy or whatever that word is. So I suspect he might vote for Carney, if only because he doesn't really like Pierre. And he had past dealings with him and he didn't like him then. Rather than like this being a particular love for Carney, I think this is just more of a case of, you don't like one candidate and you're kind of impartial about the other candidate. And for all intents and purposes, those platforms they're running on are extremely similar at this point. At that point, it's like, well, I know I don't like dealing with Pierre, so maybe I don't want to vote for him, or I didn't like dealing with Pierre. I don't want to vote for him. But I also could see him going the other way, as if he's just like, I don't really like Carney either, or he maybe doesn't. Maybe he doesn't align very well with the Liberals' past track record. Like he's been like, the only thing the Liberals have done correctly, the only thing the Liberals have said that they would do that they've done is run a deficit. It's like the only thing they said they'd run a deficit, they ran a deficit. That's it. Everything else, they're just broken promises across the board. So I suspect he may also hold that against the Liberals, in which case, he would potentially be more leaning towards the Conservatives. Again, I feel like he's probably in a weird spot where it's like, I feel like I don't think he particularly likes Pierre, and I don't think he generally likes the Conservatives, but I think he respects the Conservatives a lot more than a lot of the Liberals do, and a lot of the current NDP do, which I think gives him a higher chance of voting for the Conservatives. But I think I don't know if he likes the Liberals enough to swing him that way, is really what it comes down to. So
I feel like you've just described yourself instead of Tom Mulcair. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like,
I'm similar.
You were pretty like aligned with Mulcair's NDP when Mulcair was the leader, right? So like, and I guess like, would it be safe to assume that if, like, let's say Mulcair was still the leader of the NDP, you would be a lot more open to voting for that NDP as opposed to Jagmeet Singh's NDP, right?
Yes.
So like, given that, I feel like, you know, you've also said in the past that you're in a tough spot this election as well, because, you know, maybe there's a lot of stuff that you don't like about either major parties. So I feel like you've just described yourself. Like, tell me if that's fair.
I think that there's a lot of similarities. I've never interacted with Pierre, so I don't think I have a personal experience or anecdote where I'm like, yeah, dude's, I don't like the dude. The way I think Mulcair may have. But from a perspective of like who to vote for, I think there's a similar kind of spot where, as I said, the fiscally conservative or more fiscally conservative NDP folks feel like they're in a weird spot where it's like, I don't really align with the liberals as much as I did versus the conservatives for that aspect. But then, you know, you're also wary of the conservatives because the conservatives have, you know, issues with their social policies at the same time, you know, like, you know, it's all good and fine to vote for, you know, Pierre until he starts cutting the things you care about, right? Like, I can vote for him and be like, yeah, it'll be great, we'll have a balanced budget, but then he starts cutting all the stuff I like. I'm not going to be happy about that either. So it's definitely a weird spot to be in. I feel like they've become, I feel like it's weird also because the liberals are seemingly trying to aggressively shift towards the middle. So that makes it even more confusing because they're now more similar to the conservatives than they were, which is like, are they now more appealing, or do I trust them less because they are essentially trying to ignore their previous track record and be like, look at all the new shit we'll do. And I'm not sure if I'm willing to overlook the track record, but I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities there between that kind of spot. And yes, I do think I turned this into chatting about my perspectives on that one after a bit too.
No, I mean, actually, that was part of the question, right? Like, we were trying to like beat an endorsement out of you of or just beat an answer out of you as to which party you're gonna vote for, because the election is literally in like almost exactly a month. It'll be a month till the election tomorrow. So,
oh no.
we will keep on asking you that question until you make it clear exactly. Which I think it's only fair because everyone else on this podcast has given their endorsements. I've given my endorsement for Pierre Poilievre, and so has Sunil. And Dom is not here today, but I believe that he will be voting conservative as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's only fair that you give your answer at some point before the election, but you still have time. You still have a month. Sunil, it's finally your turn to speak.
Yeah, I guess my perspective actually comes from being like I have had experience being a political insider in the NDP. I did work on the 2011 campaign where the NDP got opposition under Jack Layton. I never worked for the party when Tom Mulcair was leader. Just to get some like inside information on the NDP, it's actually a very divided party internally between capitalists and socialists. There are left-wing capitalists in the NDP, and there's left-wing like full-on socialists. I was on the convention floor in 2011 fighting for the pro-capitalist side against the socialists because we wanted to remove the socialist language out of the NDP's official party doctrine. Jack Layton was always, you know, a pro-activist type, like left-winger that was able to like toe the line and try and kind of push the socialist wing of the party back, but he did it very softly. Just to give you a little bit of history, Tom Mulcair used to work for it was a MPP for the Quebec Liberal Liberals, which at that point in time under Josh Ray was basically a right of center party. So like Tom Mulcair is actually a fairly politically homeless individual. When he first started coming to federal politics, he actually interviewed to be a member of the Conservative Party. So Tom Mulcair is not like a traditional left winger. And when he won the leadership of the NDP campaign, a lot of the party insiders were very upset about that because they saw him as a conservative. They didn't see him as a socialist and they didn't see him as a left winger. So when Tom Mulcair took over the NDP, he kind of like hijacked the party. And he tried to force the party back to much more of a fiscally, tried to force the party back into a fiscally conservative position, which he did for the campaign. And then just to give you a little bit more history, when he lost that campaign, he was kicked out of the party and kicked out of his leadership. So I do not believe Tom Mulcair is a card-carrying NDP member, and I do not believe he has any love for that party. And Jagmeet does represent the socialist wing of the party. So like this isn't Tom Mulcair's party. I think that based on his commentary where he's been like saying positive things about Poilievre and kind of defending his position that Poilievre doesn't have a security clearance because if I was in his position, I did the same thing. I think that that indicates that he's probably going to vote for Poilievre. But I don't know for sure. I don't actually know for sure. Personally, I didn't see the vote as an endorsement of Carney. Sorry, I didn't see his statement as an endorsement of Carney. I kind of actually saw it as a petty statement. Now, I will say that I was like, when I went to the convention after my employment at the NDP, and I actually was like hanging out with staffers and stuff, and I had to pretend I wasn't going to vote for Mulcair because I didn't want to piss off my staffer friends because the entire NDP like staffer thing, they all rejected Mulcair, were very sad when he won the candidacy. Mulcair was completely elected by outsiders and not people who work for the party. And even I had to lie and say that I didn't vote for him to my friends. So if any of them ever watch this podcast, they'll now know I lied to them. But basically, the reason I say this, I just wanted to say the insider point of view because I think that Mulcair has sour grapes about Jagmeet in general, and he hates the NDP for what they did to him because they kicked him out of the party. And but I'm a supporter of Mulcair, and I'm one of those people that Tristan talks about, where I'm much more of a politically moderate, fiscally progressive, but I supported the NDP on a lot of like, social issues. In the end, I don't think he's endorsing Carney. I don't think he said anything positive about Carney. I think that the majority of NDP voters will probably switch to the majority of NDP voters typically strategically vote for the Liberals. So I think that regardless of what his intentions are, I would say maybe 60-70% of NDP voters, if they strategically vote, will end up voting for Carney. That's my opinion on it.
It's great that we have sort of a former NDP insider that can give us kind of like a deeper look into this situation. So thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for outing yourself in front of the NDP, in front of your NDP staffer friends who, if they ever watch this show, will know that they've been betrayed like years and years later. It's been like 10 years, right? Since
at least it's been 10 years, so maybe they forgot about me. So who knows?
Yeah.
Statute of limitations.
Yeah, it can't be mad. It's been too long. And it's like, and granted, like the party, as you said, has totally changed, right? So it's like, the under Jagmeet Singh, who's from, the socialist wing of the party, like you said, and I would agree with that like assessment, even though I'm not like a former NDP insider, but just judging from the perspective of an average citizen, I would say that, yeah, the NDP under Jagmeet has moved a lot further to the left than I would like, and the Mulcair NDP was a lot better in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, it's it does make sense what you're saying. So
second Jagmeet started talking about price ceilings, I was like, you've lost the plot, man. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're just trying to break economics right here. Like, just congratulations. You're gonna make everything worse. Quit talking.
He was a full Soviet there for sure. It was totally like a Soviet moment,
yeah. And it's just like I feel like that completely invalidated the arguments I was hearing from him. I was like, oh, so you're just you just have no idea what the hell you're talking about. You probably shouldn't vote for you anymore.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate. In case I'll find like maybe a article or something about that in case our audience members are like, what are you guys talking about? So I think there was this one time that last year Jack Mead was speaking in front of a grocery store in Burnaby, BC, where he proposed the idea of implementing a price cap on certain grocery store items like essentials like bread and stuff like that, which, yeah, as history has shown time and again, price caps do not work. Price caps have never worked. And what they do work on causing is not lower prices, but stuff to be permanently out of stock, right? So the idea is that bread can be any price you want. It's just if you're willing to accept having no bread, then you can give it any price you want, right? So bread can be $1 per loaf. You just won't have bread. So it is $1 per loaf. Like the government's not lying to you. If you can get it, then it's $1 per loaf. But it obviously costs more than $1 to make a loaf of bread. So the producers are just not gonna make it because, like, why would you lose money producing something just to lose money after you do all the work, right? So anything can be any price as long as you're willing to accept that that thing doesn't exist. So that's the idea of why price caps are bad, and it was very unfortunate to see Jagmeet kind of go down that route. Something that probably would have never happened if Mulcair was still the leader. But yeah, what are we gonna do, right? We'll just have to see how the election turns out, because as the polls are showing, one thing that, like, it's not like the conservatives are tanking. The reason why Carney is leading is not because the conservatives are tanking, it's because the NDP is tanking. That's like legit the main reason why the Carney liberals are surging. It's maybe like the conservatives have gone down slightly as well, but the conservatives have a strong base, right? So I would think that the floor is relatively high for how low the conservative support can go, but it just seems like the floor has dropped out under the NDP, and they've all gone to the liberals. Not all, but like half of them, like literally half the voter base who were gonna vote the NDP before when it was Trudeau, they're now going to be like, hey, Trudeau's gone, might as well vote for Carney because Jagmeet is totally just like not in it to win it. At least that's what I'm seeing in the polls. But feel free to disagree with me down in the comments if you'd like, which I will not read. So let's move on to the final story of tonight, if you guys are ready. So let's talk a little bit more actually about this story is both Canadian and American. It's more politics, so I'm hoping that you guys are not sick of eating politics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, every week. But this story is about the Trump tariffs, right? Which is obviously top of mind for this campaign that's happening right now in Canada, where Trump, after, he's been flip-flopping back and forth about when to implement tariffs, on what to implement tariffs on, and it's been on and again and off again. And recently, he just signed another executive order that will impose 25% tariffs on cars not made in the U.S. And apparently, this is ready to go and is supposed to come into effect on April 3rd. So this has definitely sent shockwaves in Canadian politics once again, because car parts are one of the biggest export items that we manufacture here in Canada and then export to the United States. And even though we don't have wholly owned Canadian auto companies, we do a lot of business with companies like GM and Ford, which Magna, funny enough, I used to live in Aurora, which was where Magna is based out of. And Magna is one of the, I think is one of the world's biggest car part manufacturing companies. And they're based here in Ontario. So there's a lot of implications as to what 25% tariffs on cars and car parts will mean for Canadians. And Canadians are kind of directing their anger at Trump, obviously. And I guess that is logical, but they're also directing their anger towards Elon Musk, who's seen as one of the biggest Trump supporters. And recently, there's been a contract that was signed between WestJet, which is a Canadian airline company, and Starlink, which the contract was supposed to let Starlink provide in-flight internet on WestJet flights. But then there's a bunch of angry liberals who are calling on WestJet to cancel this contract because apparently Starlink is the devil, because Elon is the devil, and all this stuff. So I just kind of want to get your opinions on two things, right? So number one is the tariffs that on car parts, and do you think that like there's how much impact do you think this is gonna be on Canada, and how long do you think this is going to be in effect? Because Trump is saying that, oh, these tariffs are permanent. We're gonna like put it on, and then we're gonna reshore all these car companies and make cars right at home. But another like kind of group of analysts are saying that like, listen, this is just negotiating tactics. There's so much manufacturing that can't be onshored, so eventually Trump's going to have to drop these tariffs. So where do you stand on that? Do you think Trump is serious about having these tariffs on kind of forever? Or is he gonna kind of relent at some point and then we're gonna strike a deal? Or what's your opinion on that in general? And then number two, on the Starlink thing, do you think is justified? Should we cancel Starlink, and should we just like ban them from WestJet or ban them from like Canada as a whole? And like, why is the anger being directed at Elon, right? Because I know like Elon's a big Trump supporter, but like, is that the only reason, right? Because there's a lot of other like rich billionaires that are Trump supporters, but it seems like Elon's getting an especially big portion of the kind of hate, especially from Canadians, just for supporting Trump. But I don't know if there's like any specific thing that Elon is doing that pissed off Canadians besides supporting Trump, or is that the only thing? Or do you think this whole like push against Starlink and Tesla and Elon in general is justified, or what's going on here? So kind of a two-part story, if you guys, either one of you, want to take it away.
Sure. I think that like on the tariff thing, I guess the way I want to look at it is that like I don't want to just get emotional about it and do like the whole TDS Trump derangement syndrome thing, because I think that's kind of what our politicians are doing, and I just don't think I know it makes everybody feel better, and they get to get their emotions out, and they get to show Canadians that they're fighting for them and all that stuff, but for the most part, it's purely performative. I think that what Doug Ford did today was a purely performative act. I'm not saying that Canada doesn't have a reason to be pissed off. That's not my argument here. Like, first of all, everybody, including Doug Ford and like Polyev and even Carney, said like they're not even sure if Trump's just like if he's gonna pull out of this in 2 days or what. So I think we're like entering this phase of Trump's like move on tariffs where like we're starting to get diminishing marginal returns. Like I think that what Trump did get a lot. I think okay, there's elements of this where like we've discussed where I do believe that Trump wants to get concessions from other countries. I do believe America does have an asymmetric trading relationship with a lot of countries, which they have used as like a power play, as a way to get what they want geopolitically often. But I think that the problem with asymmetric like trade deficits is that even like in economic theory, it's like theorized if trade is set up like properly, trade deficits are supposed to kind of resolve themselves over time. They're not supposed to be permanent. And when trade deficits are permanent, as they are for a lot of for the US and a lot of the countries that they import goods for, I think the main issue I have with that is that like the United States the US workers can only keep their jobs and can prevent themselves from being hollowed out if they're significantly more productive than their counterparts in, let's say, a country like Germany or Canada that also produces cars. Now, the truth is America is more productive than most of the countries that they're trading with, which is why they're able to like maintain asymmetric trading relationships just for 70 years. Like if Canada tried to maintain asymmetric trading relationships for 70 years, we would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. But it's important to remember that America has like $36 trillion in deficit, and the people who have to ultimately pay for it are their voters. And like Mega 1.0 specifically, like I think that's their whole point, is they don't want to pay for these commitments anymore, and they don't want America to play the role they've been playing in the world. Now that's like, I'm just being sympathetic to MAGA. I think Canada is being treated very badly, but I'm being sympathetic to the MAGA crowd and why they believe what they believe. I think that he is going to be successful at ultimately getting concessions at a place like Canada, Mexico, and Europe. Is he serious about 25% tariffs across the board on all car parts and all cars coming from Canada and Mexico? No, I don't think he is, because I've seen him pull back on this every like 2 weeks or so. And I think that even Canadian politicians are starting to call his bluff. And I think this is a standard operating procedure for Trump. I think he just acts this way. When his like strategy starts to get like diminishing marginal returns, he typically like backs off and moves on to the next thing. And I think we're at that phase of this tariff fight. I think like April 2nd is going to be like the buy the news event. I think that like the worst news is already kind of priced in. Like I think MAGA style, like Trump style, is all about provocation. Like he's basically about getting your opponent annoyed, getting them emotional, and getting your opponent off balance, and that gives him like power to like manipulate the situation. It's very much an art of the deal, the type strategy that Trump's going for. And I think that ultimately that's what's going on right now. I don't think that like companies like General Motors with 50% of their like operating capacity outside of the United States could even survive a month with tariffs at 25%. So I don't think he's being serious about across the board tariffs at 25% on parts and cars, because it doesn't make any sense economically. And I don't think Trump's that stupid economically that he believes that America is going to suddenly onshore all these jobs in like a year. It's going to take like 2 decades to onshore half these jobs. And I think he knows that. I think that Trump likes to get announcements like, we're going to invest $50 billion in the U.S. economy. And I don't think he's got an adequate announcements for the U.S. automakers. That's like one aspect of this. The other thing I've seen online, and I've been kind of trying to follow the story, like apparently Canadian cars are still exempt from a lot of these tariffs because like, and that Trump didn't really communicate that at his press conference yesterday, but apparently a lot of Canadian cars are still going to be able to enter tariff free, or they're going to be able to enter in a way that like if 25% of their parts are Canadian, they'll only get like a portion of the car will be tariffed. So I don't totally understand what's going to happen here, but I don't believe Trump is going to put this level of tariff on vehicles. And I think it's just the typical Trump art of the deal type thing. But I actually think if you look at how the market reacted today, they kind of called his bluff. I think the market kind of knows that Trump's not going to go this extreme with it. And the market understands that Trump can't onshore all the jobs in any short period of time. So that's basically where I stand on that. I don't think that having Trump derangement syndrome and Mark Carney coming out and saying Canada's no longer has a good relationship with America is a good way of handling this. I don't think that putting 25% tariffs on U.S. cars is a good idea. I think it would decimate our economy. I think we're bluffing too. So that's kind of where I see it happening. We're both bluffing. We're both hoping that the U.S. auto lobby gets scared and convinces Trump not to do this. That's kind of like where I see things going. On the whole Starlink and Elon derangement syndrome, again, I've already said last week, like this was a very bad strategy for the Democrats to go through with in the 2024 election. It is the reason why, it's one of the fundamental reasons why they lost. I don't think Canadian politicians should use this strategy. I don't think it's going to work well. And I think that, I think for Starlink, I think our company should use the best products. I don't think we should be not using a nationalized Telestat, which is a shitty product in the first place. I think we should be using a good product, and I think Canadian companies should be using good products. And that's basically what it comes down to. I'm kind of a purist there. I don't think there's any reason to politicize WestJet's choice on internet providers.
Yeah, and I really hope that WestJet doesn't cave to the pressure of the people that are screaming at them, because like it seems kind of crazy to me that people are protesting against having good in-flight internet access. Like it's not that long ago that I thought in-flight internet access was like a miracle, right? That it can be done in the first place. And then it was like a further miracle, a second miracle that uh, I think Air Canada is they're able to offer in-flight texting for free, so you can use the stuff like Facebook Messenger without images, and that's absolutely free now. On if you have an Aeroplan membership and if you're on an Air Canada flight, and there's only going to be more and more developments where maybe eventually you'll have a free tier of full internet access, and things like Starlink is taking a big step towards that goal. And even if you had to pay, if they can get the cost down to be like if you had to pay like $10 and it's a long flight, then maybe it's worth it. So yeah, and it just like people are protesting against that, where like having internet access on a flight is something that's like crazy to me that I still can't fully get used to, even though I've taken several Air Canada flights in the recent years where they have the free texting thing. But yeah, it's the Elon derangement syndrome has gone pretty bad in Canada, and it's also the fact that like nobody can actually name like one valid reason why they hate Elon. Besides Elon supports Trump, but like even that is like a wishy-washy kind of like a unclear reason, because it's like what does it mean to support Trump, and like what policy does he like support? Because I haven't heard of Elon really talk about tariffing Canada or any of that. So obviously he's broadly pro-Trump, but he hasn't really said anything against Canada in particular, at least as far as I've seen. So it's like you're protesting him because he supports Trump. Well, like a lot of people support Trump, and they can't like really point to one specific thing that Elon did. Not even one example of why specifically they don't like Elon or his stance on that particular topic. I don't know. Like, am I like off base here, or do you think that like it's just pure Elon derangement? Like, I can't find a valid
Yeah.
reason why we should hate him.
I mean, I guess like the whole like him liking Trump is gonna get people more emotional than I mean, they're always emotional and upset about Elon. And there's an NPC factor, the non-player character idea, where like people just like do what the media believes what the media tells them to believe, and the media is saying Elon bad, okay, Elon bad. That has always been an aspect of Elon derangement syndrome. But like the Trump thing is a little bit more emotional because like Canada is being targeted by Trump. He is bullying us. He's treating us like crap. He's not treating us fairly, and then Elon gets associated with him. So the NPC thing kind of goes over to that side. I just don't think it's very rational because I just don't think it's going to be something that serves Canada well. Like being enemies with Elon Musk, this it's not a good idea. Like this guy can potentially like put like battery factories in our country one day, but we're like let's just like be a little bit more strategic about which businessman we decide to be enemies with. I know that anybody who's associated with Trump is a Nazi to some people, but like we got to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more strategic about this because like our economy's like already kind of crappy, and like it would be nice to get like Silicon Valley people to invest in our economy, especially Elon Musk. And
Yeah,
he's Canadian. He's Canadian. I just want to point that out. He has Canadian citizenship. He like kind of cares about this country a little bit, maybe just a little.
yeah, and he went to Queens, right? And yeah, people are forgetting that Tesla employs a lot of Canadians too. So it's it's like, yeah, sure, you can push people don't like him because he's a billionaire, but again, there's a lot of billionaires in this world, and some of them so happen to be pro-Trump, like Elon, but he's not the only pro-Trump billionaire out there, just saying, right? Tristan, your thoughts on this whole thing?
I think that the I think that actually putting 25% tariffs on cars not made in the US, aka on putting it on the parts, etc., that is a great recipe to just make Americans pay a ton of money for their cars now, because the parts just cross the border like a million times. I'm exaggerating, but I think it's like 6 is the official number. And when something's being tariffed 6 times at 25% each time, that adds up rapidly. So I think that, and the simple fact of the matter is that the factories cannot move to America that quickly. It's not possible. It's not, you're not going to turn around and have a GM factory that's in Ontario move to America in the next like couple years. It's just full stop not going to happen. They don't have time. They have too many processes set up the way they're currently set up. You give them 5-10 years, yeah, they could move back to America. You give them the current rate of you basically you do it for a Trump term, they're not going to do it, because it's just not it's not viable to, they might, a future factory they might build in the States, but it's not viable to move your current production into the States, because you're just going to you're not going to have time. So you need those generating revenue to pay for the to generate profit for the company, right? They just can't. So Americans will just pay more for their cars if Trump actually puts us in, which means, to me, I think it's likely that he's just going to cancel it at some point, or if he keep it for a short term, if anything, just to show the car companies that he means business. I think that's kind of more so what I'm thinking. So I don't really think this is viable as a long-term solution, because, as I've said, the tariffs will end up hurting Americans more than anyone else. It might hurt us a bit from it might hurt us a bit, but it's not going to hurt us sufficiently, because at the end of the day, this is kind of similar to the oil perspective. It's like, what are we gonna do? They're like, we send our oil to the States. That's it. There is no alternative. And our car parts, we send them through the supply chain, has them going all the way through NAFTA. So they're not going to be able to change on a dime. There's just no way. So at the end of the day, it's just I'm hoping that it's just posturing, because if it's not just posturing, I mean, buy your cars now if you're American. Here, Zillennial, if you want to speak before I go into the Starlink.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I just wanted to comment on your thing about where you said you said he means business. I actually think this is a situation where the auto lobby won. Trump lost this round. He didn't win. The auto lobby is not going to have to move any of their factories. He lost this round. This is actually going to, it's not going to really impact the poll numbers, but this is a bit of a blunder for Trump. The auto lobby showed him that they won, and he had kind of threw a hissy fit yesterday, and the market didn't react the way he thought it would.
Yeah, that's a good point on the auto lobby. Also, the auto lobby is not going to let him keep this in long term. If they have any sense, they're gonna because at the end of the day, the auto companies are the ones who are going to lose, in addition to the American consumer who's buying the car. It's also going to be auto company that's now selling less cars, because American consumers are going, cars are more expensive. I can no longer afford a car. I'll buy a used car, or I'll buy something else, right? Buy a different car that costs less money because it didn't get tariffed 18 times crossing the border. And so the auto companies have a very vested interest in getting Trump to back down on this one, which I think that likely is going to be what occurs. And then with regards to Starlink on WestJet, yeah, I kind of agree with the perspective of do you guys not want good internet on your plane? I understand that, yeah, a lot of people don't like Elon, and I'm not Elon's biggest fan in the world either, but you can't deny that Starlink is a good product, It gets the job done. It works well. And it will be better for people to have it on airplanes than to not have it on airplanes, from my perspective. Right. So, you can go. I'm not going to fly with you, WestJet, until you cancel Starlink. All you want, except for the part where you realize there's not that many airlines in Canada, right? Your options are Air Canada, Flair, and WestJet, basically. I guess Porter's kind of there too, but like those are the three real ones that are consistently flying. And let me just say this: WestJet is the middle of the line one. They've got some budget stuff, they got some expensive stuff. So if you don't want to fly on Flair, where they cancel your flight periodically just because it's Tuesday and they feel like it, and you don't want to fly in Air Canada because you have bills to pay, and you haven't won the lottery recently, so you don't want to pay twice the price to just get a drink on in-flight and in-flight entertainment. You can go with WestJet, where maybe you don't get a drink, but your flight hopefully won't get canceled either. So I think that and I mean, heck, now you'll get internet maybe for a reasonable price. I just feel like this is I feel like it's pretty extra from my perspective. Like they're like, it's not going to move the needle at all. Like, not at all. Elon's not going to be like, oh my gosh, WestJet canceled their contract. What am I going to do? I can't pay the bills this month. Like, this is literally a rounding error. I mean, I don't know how much the contract is for, but I am confident that it is a rounding error in the grand scheme of, Tesla and that conglomerate's. Is Starlink part of Tesla? I'm assuming it is.
Part of SpaceX.
SpaceX.
Okay. Well, it's all part of the same kind of Elon-owned perspective. Again, I'm pretty sure it's probably a rounding error in that grand scheme of things there. So just like, no one is going to notice if WestJet cancels this contract, and you will have lost your in-flight entertainment for nothing, or in-flight, maybe not in-flight entertainment, your in-flight Wi-Fi for nothing. Congratulations, you've both won and lost at the same time. This is the pinnacle of a Pyrrhic victory. You have won, but at what cost? So I just think this is very much a battle that's not worth fighting.
Yeah, I mean, you just described Doug Ford's response to providing internet for people in Northern Ontario, where it was supposed to be Starlink, but then, he decided to go on this like anti-Elon rant and be like, oh, I ripped up this Starlink contract. So like, I don't know. I don't live in like Northern Ontario, although I'm like pretty up north compared to a lot of other people. It's still Southern Ontario. So I don't know how the Northern Ontarians are like. But if I was living in Northern Ontario, I would be sitting in my living room watching cable news because I don't have internet, and then I will watch the press conference where Doug Ford's like, we've canceled the Starlink contract, and then I'll be like, so what about my internet? So you just not have internet, I guess, now, right?
I mean, if you're from Northern Ontario and you want high speed internet that you can't have access to, just go to Costco and buy a Starlink and just like pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that'll have to be the solution, right? But like the government was supposed to like subsidize this and like, make it cheap for people, because I mean, Starlink is still more expensive, relatively speaking, compared to other options. But if you're in Northern Ontario, you don't have other options. So it's going to cost you a lot more than people living in Southern Ontario, which was why they launched the program to provide Starlink to the Northern Ontarians in the first place, right?
Did they offer any alternative to like, as like an alternative company to Starlink? Like, well, I'm sure there's competitors.
Well, there's another one called Telesat, but it's not as good. And also, Telesat is not owned by Elon, but is owned by like, or at least a large proportion of their shareholders is another American company. So
It's also more expensive.
yeah, it's more
And they use
expensive. And the
and
service
they
is
rely on Elon to get their satellites to space. So it's like just use Starlink is the way to go. Like it's just unfortunately that's the way to go. I'm sorry Canada lost this corporate battle, but
yeah, full disclosure, I did not vote for Doug Ford because in the past election that just happened, just because I think he's a disaster. Even though I'm more conservative leaning these days, the Doug Ford is not like a real conservative in my opinion. So like, and when I tell people that, like, oh, I didn't vote for Doug Ford, people are like, oh, you're a progressive now. I was like, no, actually, I think Doug Ford is like a fake conservative, and he's not conservative enough, in my opinion. So, which is why I guess he like won a big majority, because he's like, you know, right in the middle. People who don't watch politics think he's a conservative, so they vote for him. And then this is the kind of the stuff that he pulls, right? Where it's all very performative. You like rip up a contract just because Starlink is owned by Elon, and we don't like Elon, and then all the people that you're supposed to be actually helping are just kind of like left hung out to dry. So that's the state of Ontario for you, and we're stuck with Doug Ford for another 4 years at least.
yeah, he's a total clown. I did for the first time did the Bitcoiner thing, and I decided not to participate in the election. I didn't vote for anyone, but yeah, Doug Ford's a total clown. He's pure performative, and he has no substance.
That might be the only thing that you and the modern progressive left here in Canada can agree upon. It's like hate for Doug Ford. But yeah, anyways, that's all the stories that I have for tonight. So unless you guys have anything else to add, my voice is dying too. Unless you guys have anything else to add, why don't we wrap it up here? Since Tristan, you're the outro guy, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channels and the Clips channel. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.
Have a good one.
See you next time.